Judge William Harrington walked into the courtroom at exactly 9 a.m. on Monday morning. He was a tall man with gray hair and small glasses that sat on the edge of his nose. He had been a judge for 25 years in this small town, and everyone knew not to waste his time. "All rise," called the bailiff, and the people in the courtroom stood up quickly. Some looked worried. Others looked tired. A few looked angry. Judge Harrington did not notice any of them as he sat down in his big black chair. "First case," he said in a loud voice. He did not smile. Judge Harrington rarely smiled in his courtroom. He believed smiling made him look soft, and he did not want to be soft. He wanted to be respected, and maybe even a little feared. The morning moved along quickly. Judge Harrington handled 15 cases in less than 2 hours. Most were simple things: speeding tickets, small arguments between neighbors, and people who hadn't paid their bills. The judge made quick decisions and moved on. He was proud of how fast he worked. "Next case," called the bailiff. "Marcus Johnson, parking violation." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and a man walked in. He was about 40 years old, dressed in a plain blue polo shirt and dark jeans. He carried a simple brown bag over his shoulder. Unlike most people who came into the courtroom, Marcus Johnson did not look nervous at all. He walked with confidence, his back straight and his head high. Judge Harrington noticed this right away, and it bothered him. Most people who came before him showed at least a little fear or worry. This man looked completely calm, as if he was walking into a coffee shop instead of a courtroom. "Mr. Johnson," said the judge, looking down at the papers in front of him instead of at Marcus, "you're charged with parking in a restricted zone on Oak Street last Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. How do you plead?" Marcus stood at the small wooden table in front of the judge's bench. "Not guilty, Your Honor," he said in a clear, strong voice. Judge Harrington looked up, surprised. Most people just said guilty and paid their fine. It was easier that way. "Not guilty," repeated the judge. "The officer's report is very clear, Mr. Johnson. Your car was parked in a no parking zone." "Yes, Your Honor, but the sign was covered by tree branches," Marcus explained. "I couldn't see it when I parked. I have pictures to show you." Judge Harrington felt a small flash of annoyance. He was already running behind schedule today, and now this man wanted to argue about a simple parking ticket. The judge looked at his watch. "Mr. Johnson, this court doesn't have time for excuses," he said sharply. "The officer who wrote the ticket says the sign was visible. That's good enough for me." Marcus opened his mouth to speak again, but Judge Harrington held up his hand to stop him. "Save it, Mr. Johnson. I've heard every excuse in the book. The fine is $300 plus court costs. Pay the clerk on your way out." The judge was already writing on the form, ready to call the next case, but Marcus Johnson didn't move from his spot. He stood there, looking directly at the judge. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "I have evidence I'd like to present." Judge Harrington looked up, surprised again by this man's confidence. Who did he think he was? Most people accepted the judge's decision without question, especially for something as small as a parking ticket. "Evidence denied," said the judge coldly. "My decision is final. Next case." But as Marcus turned to leave, something unexpected happened. A woman sitting in the back row stood up. It was Lisa Torres, the court administrator who had worked with Judge Harrington for over 15 years. She walked quickly to the front and leaned close to the judge's ear. "Your Honor," she whispered, but her voice was urgent. "There's something you should know about Mr. Johnson." Judge Harrington's face changed as Lisa Torres whispered in his ear. His eyes widened slightly, and he looked at Marcus Johnson with new interest. "Mr. Johnson," the judge said, his voice suddenly softer, "I understand you work for the U.S. Attorney's Office." The courtroom became very quiet. People who had been half asleep now sat up straight. Even the bailiff looked surprised. Marcus nodded calmly. "Yes, Your Honor. I've been a federal prosecutor for 8 years now." Judge Harrington cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable for the first time that day. "And what exactly do you do there, Mr. Johnson?" "I lead the Civil Rights Division, Your Honor. I was actually on my way to meet with state prosecutors about a joint case when I got this ticket." Marcus spoke clearly, not raising his voice, but making sure everyone could hear him. The judge shifted in his seat. Several lawyers in the courtroom exchanged knowing looks. They understood what was happening. Marcus Johnson wasn't just any lawyer. He was a powerful federal prosecutor who handled civil rights cases about fairness and equal treatment under the law. "I see," said Judge Harrington slowly. "Well, Mr. Johnson, in light of this information, perhaps we should review your evidence after all." Marcus looked directly at the judge. "So my job makes my evidence worth seeing now, Your Honor?" The question hung in the air. No one spoke. Judge Harrington's face turned slightly red. "I simply mean that we should be thorough in all cases," the judge said, not answering the question directly. "Please present your evidence." Marcus opened his brown bag and took out 5 photographs. He handed them to the bailiff, who gave them to the judge. "As you can see, Your Honor, the no parking sign on Oak Street is almost completely covered by tree branches in these pictures. I took these photos right after I got the ticket." Judge Harrington looked at the pictures carefully. The first showed a street sign that was indeed hard to see because of thick tree branches. The second showed the same sign from another angle, still mostly hidden. The other photos showed the same thing from different spots on the street. The evidence was clear. No one could reasonably expect a driver to see that sign. The judge put the photos down and looked at Marcus. Everyone in the courtroom waited to hear what he would say. "Based on this evidence, the case is dismissed," Judge Harrington said quickly. He banged his gavel and reached for the next file, clearly wanting to move on. But Marcus didn't move from his spot. "Your Honor," he said, "I have a question, if you don't mind." The judge looked up, surprised that Marcus was still standing there. "Yes, Mr. Johnson. I'm curious about something. What would have happened if I wasn't a federal prosecutor? What if I was just a regular person without a law degree or an important job? Would you have looked at my evidence then?" The courtroom was completely silent now. Everyone watched the judge, waiting for his answer. Judge Harrington's face turned a deeper shade of red. "Mr. Johnson, I treat all people in my courtroom equally." "With all respect, Your Honor, that's not what I experienced today," Marcus said firmly. "When you thought I was just an ordinary citizen, you didn't want to see my evidence. You only changed your mind when you learned about my job." Several people in the courtroom nodded in agreement. A young woman in the back row even clapped once before stopping herself. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Johnson, I've dismissed your case. You're free to go." "Yes, I am," Marcus agreed. "But what about the person after me? And the person after them? How many people have had legitimate defenses that you didn't bother to hear because you were in a hurry or because they didn't seem important enough?" Judge Harrington put his gavel down. For once, he seemed to have no quick answer. "Mr. Johnson, please see me in my chambers after court today," he said finally. "Bailiff, call the next case." As Marcus walked back to his seat, many people in the courtroom looked at him with new respect. Even those who were waiting for their own cases seemed hopeful now. Someone had finally spoken up to the judge who never listened. But Marcus knew this wasn't over. The real test would be what happened in the judge's chambers later that day. The rest of the morning moved slowly in the courtroom. Judge Harrington wasn't as quick with his decisions anymore. He listened more carefully to each person who came before him. People noticed the change. Some whispered about what had happened with Marcus Johnson. At 12 o'clock, the judge called for a lunch break. "Court will resume at 1:30, he announced. Then he looked at Marcus, who was still sitting in the back row. "Mr. Johnson, my chambers, please." Marcus followed the judge through a side door. The judge's private office was large, with dark wood furniture and law books lining the walls. Diplomas and awards hung everywhere. Judge Harrington sat behind his big desk and pointed to a chair for Marcus. For a full minute, neither man spoke. The judge looked at some papers on his desk, avoiding Marcus's eyes. Finally, he looked up. "Mr. Johnson, I want you to understand something. I see over 50 cases every day. 50. Do you know what would happen if I gave everyone the time they wanted?" Marcus nodded. "The court would back up. Cases would take longer." "Exactly," said the judge. "The system would slow down. Justice delayed is justice denied. Isn't that what they teach you in law school?" "They also teach us that justice rushed is no justice at all," Marcus replied calmly. Judge Harrington frowned. "Easy for you to say. You probably handle, 10 cases at a time?" "Sometimes fewer, sometimes more," Marcus said. "But each one gets my full attention." The judge leaned back in his chair. "That's a luxury I don't have." "It's not a luxury, Your Honor. It's a duty." Those words seemed to hit Judge Harrington hard. He stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the courthouse parking lot below. "Do you know how long I've been a judge, Mr. Johnson?" 25 years, according to the plaque outside your courtroom." 25 years, the judge repeated. "When I started, I promised myself I would be fair to everyone, but somewhere along the way," his voice trailed off. Marcus waited, giving the judge time to collect his thoughts. "Did you come to my courtroom on purpose today, Mr. Johnson?" Judge Harrington suddenly asked. Was this some kind of test? Marcus shook his head. "No, Your Honor. I really did get a parking ticket on Oak Street. The sign really was covered by branches. I wasn't planning any of this." The judge turned from the window. "But once it happened, you decided to make a point." "I decided to stand up for myself," Marcus corrected him. "The same way any citizen should be able to stand up for themselves in your courtroom." Judge Harrington walked back to his desk and sat down heavily in his chair. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "This is interesting timing, Mr. Johnson. The State Judicial Review Board just sent me this report last week. It shows the outcomes of cases in my court compared to other judges." He handed it to Marcus. Marcus opened the folder and looked at the charts inside. The numbers told a clear story. People without lawyers got less time to speak in Judge Harrington's court. Their cases were decided faster, and they were found guilty more often than in other courts. "Have you looked at these numbers closely, Your Honor?" Marcus asked. The judge sighed. "Not until last night. After our encounter yesterday morning, I took the report home. I couldn't sleep, so I read the whole thing." He paused. "The patterns are troubling." Marcus closed the folder and placed it back on the desk. "What do you plan to do about it?" For the first time since Marcus had met him, Judge Harrington looked truly humble. "I'm not sure yet, but I know I need to do something. That's why I wanted to talk to you." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm listening. You handle civil rights cases. You know how systems can improve." The judge took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I need your help, Mr. Johnson." Marcus hadn't expected this. He thought the judge would be angry or defensive. Instead, he seemed genuinely troubled by his own behavior. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Marcus asked carefully. Judge Harrington put his glasses back on and looked directly at Marcus. "Help me be a better judge." Marcus stared at Judge Harrington, surprised by his request. "Help you be a better judge," he repeated. "Yes," the judge said. "I've been doing things the same way for so long, I didn't see the problems. Or maybe I didn't want to see them." Marcus thought carefully before answering. This wasn't at all what he had expected when he walked into court that morning. "I appreciate you admitting there's a problem, Your Honor. That's an important first step." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "But I need to know if you're really serious about making changes." "I am," the judge said firmly. "Then I have some ideas," Marcus said, "but they will require real work on your part." "I'm listening," Judge Harrington said, taking out a notepad. "First, you need to track your own decisions," Marcus explained. "Keep records of how much time you give each person to speak, what evidence you allow, and what your rulings are. Then look for patterns." The judge wrote this down, nodding. "I can do that." What else? Second, visit other courtrooms. Watch how other judges handle similar cases. You might learn some new approaches. Good idea, the judge said, still writing. I haven't observed other judges in years. Third, Marcus continued, I suggest you meet with community leaders, especially from neighborhoods that appear most often in your courtroom. Listen to their concerns about the justice system. Judge Harrington stopped writing. That one makes me uncomfortable. That's exactly why it's important, Marcus said. The discomfort means there's something to learn there. The judge thought about this, then slowly wrote it down. Anything else? Marcus nodded. Yes. The most important suggestion is that you create a feedback system. People who appear in your court should have a way to share their experiences. You want me to give people a chance to complain about me. The judge looked shocked. I want you to give people a voice. Marcus corrected him. Just like you're giving me a voice right now. Judge Harrington put his pen down and looked at the list he had written. These are big changes, Mr. Johnson. Yes, they are, Marcus agreed. But if you're serious about being a better judge, they're necessary. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, why are you helping me? After how I treated you, you could file a complaint. You could make trouble for me. Marcus smiled slightly. That wouldn't improve the system, Your Honor. It would just remove one judge and replace him with another, who might have the same problems. So this isn't about me personally? The judge asked. It's about justice, Marcus said simply. That's what I care about. Judge Harrington stood up and walked around his desk. He extended his hand to Marcus. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I didn't deserve your help today, but I'm grateful for it. Marcus stood and shook the judge's hand. Don't thank me yet. The real test will be what happens in your courtroom tomorrow and the day after that. Would you be willing to check in with me in a few weeks? The judge asked. To see if I'm making progress. Marcus nodded. I can do that, and I can connect you with some experts who train judges on fair practices. For the first time, Judge Harrington smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. I'd appreciate that. As Marcus turned to leave, the judge called after him, Mr. Johnson, one more thing. Marcus stopped at the door. Yes. That parking sign on Oak Street. I'll make sure the city trims those branches this week. Thank you, Your Honor, Marcus said with a nod. As he walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, Marcus felt cautiously hopeful. Change was never easy, especially for someone set in their ways for 25 years. But Judge Harrington seemed sincere. Marcus took out his phone and called his office. Janet, I'm going to be late. Something important came up. He paused. Actually, I think something important is just beginning. Across town, Judge Harrington sat at his desk, looking at his list of changes. He picked up his phone. Lisa, please cancel my golf game this weekend. I have some courtrooms to visit and some reading to do. And with that, both men began moving down a new path, one they never expected when the day began. 3 weeks passed. Judge Harrington's courtroom looked the same from the outside, but people who entered it noticed something different. The judge was changing. Lisa Torres, the court administrator, watched with surprise as the judge spent time talking to each person who came before him. He asked questions. He listened to answers. Court sessions ran longer now, but no one seemed to mind. Case number 42. Lisa called out one Monday morning. Maria Gonzalez, parking violation. An older woman with gray hair walked slowly to the front. She looked nervous and held a piece of paper tightly in her hand. She did not speak English well. Buenos dias, Señora Gonzalez, Judge Harrington said. Necesita un intérprete hoy. Do you need an interpreter today? The woman looked up in surprise. Sigh, por favor, she said, relief showing on her face. Lisa looked at the judge with raised eyebrows. He had been taking Spanish lessons. No one knew until now. The court interpreter came forward, and the case proceeded. The woman explained through the interpreter that she had parked in the wrong spot because she couldn't read the English sign. She showed a picture of the sign on her phone. "Thank you for bringing this evidence," the judge said kindly. "I understand the confusion." He reduced her fine and then added, "I'll also recommend that the city add Spanish language to parking signs in that area." After court ended that day, Marcus Johnson appeared at the door of the judge's chambers. The judge had invited him to check on the progress. "Mr. Johnson, come in," Judge Harrington said, standing to greet him. "Thank you for coming." Marcus entered and sat down. "How are things going, Your Honor?" The judge smiled. "See for yourself." He handed Marcus a folder. Inside were detailed records. Charts showed how much time the judge spent on each case. Notes described evidence presented and decisions made. Most interesting was a section called Feedback that contained comments from people who had appeared in court. "You've been busy," Marcus said, impressed. "I've been learning," the judge corrected him. "And not just from paper records. I visited 4 other courtrooms. Judge Chen in District 3 has some excellent practices I'm adopting." "I heard about the Spanish," Marcus said with a smile. Judge Harrington looked embarrassed. "Just basics so far. But I realize that 20% of the people in my courtroom speak Spanish as their first language. I should meet them halfway." "That's commendable," Marcus said. "Have there been challenges?" The judge sighed. "Plenty. Some attorneys are frustrated with the longer court sessions. They were used to getting in and out quickly. And frankly, it's exhausting to listen so carefully all day." "Change isn't easy," Marcus agreed. "No, but it's necessary." The judge leaned forward. "I've been doing this job for 25 years, Mr. Johnson. I thought I knew everything. But I was wrong." Just then, there was a knock at the door. Lisa entered with a stack of files. "The community meeting is confirmed for Thursday evening," she told the judge. "The neighborhood association is providing the space, and 15 community leaders have RSVP'd." "Thank you, Lisa," the judge said. He turned to Marcus. "I took your advice about meeting with community leaders. We're holding a listening session." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's a big step. I'm nervous about it," the judge admitted. "They'll have hard questions." "Yes, they will," Marcus said honestly. "Would you consider attending?" Judge Harrington asked. "Not to speak for me or defend me. Just to, I don't know, observe. Give me feedback afterward." Marcus thought about it. "I can do that." The judge looked relieved. "Thank you." As Marcus stood to leave, he noticed something new on the judge's wall. Next to all the diplomas and awards was a simple framed quote. It read, "Justice that is rushed is no justice at all." Marcus smiled when he saw it. Those were his own words from their first meeting. "I see you put up a reminder," he said, pointing to the quote. Judge Harrington nodded. "I need it. Old habits die hard." "Keep at it," Marcus said as he walked to the door. "By the way, I drove down Oak Street yesterday. The branches blocking that parking sign have been trimmed. Small steps," the judge said with a smile. "Small steps toward bigger change." As Marcus left the courthouse, he felt something he hadn't expected. Respect for the judge who once treated him unfairly. People could change. Even after 25 years of doing things the wrong way, they could learn to do better. Thursday evening arrived, and Judge Harrington stood nervously outside the Oak Street Community Center. He adjusted his tie for the 3rd time. This was the first community meeting he had ever attended as a judge. "You'll be fine," Lisa said beside him. She had volunteered to come along for support. The judge took a deep breath. "Let's go in." Inside, about 30 people sat in chairs arranged in a circle. Some wore business clothes. Others wore work uniforms or casual outfits. They all looked up when the judge entered. Their faces showed surprise, curiosity, and in some cases, distrust. Marcus Johnson was already there, sitting quietly at one side of the circle. He nodded to the judge but didn't come over. This was the judge's meeting to handle. A woman stood up and introduced herself as Maria Diaz, president of the Neighborhood Association. "Thank you for coming, Judge Harrington. This is unexpected but welcome." The judge cleared his throat. "Thank you for having me, Ms. Diaz. I'm here to listen and learn." Maria gestured to an empty chair in the circle. "Please, join us." For the next 2 hours, Judge Harrington heard stories that made him uncomfortable. A young man described waiting all day for his case to be called, only to have the judge dismiss his explanation in 30 seconds. An older woman told how she lost her driver's license after a minor violation because she couldn't afford the fine and the judge wouldn't consider a payment plan. A middle-aged man named Robert spoke directly to the judge. "My son made a mistake, Judge Harrington. It was his first offense, just a small thing. But you gave him the maximum sentence without even asking about his situation. He lost his job. He lost his apartment. All because you didn't take 2 minutes to really hear his case." The judge didn't make excuses. He listened and wrote notes in a small notebook. Sometimes he asked questions to understand better. By the end of the meeting, his notebook was full, and his face showed the weight of what he had heard. When everyone had spoken, Maria Diaz turned to the judge. "You've heard our concerns, Judge Harrington. What do you plan to do with this information?" The room became very quiet. All eyes were on the judge. He stood up slowly, looking around at the faces watching him. "First, I want to thank you all for your honesty. It couldn't have been easy to tell these stories, especially to the person who caused much of the hurt." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I've been a judge for 25 years. For most of that time, I thought efficiency was the most important part of my job. Move cases quickly, keep the system running." He shook his head. "I was wrong." People in the circle exchanged surprised looks. "Justice isn't about speed," the judge continued. "It's about fairness. It's about giving each person their day in court, really giving it to them, not just pretending to." He looked down at his notebook. "I've written down every concern you've shared tonight. I'm making changes in my courtroom already, but there's clearly more to do." Robert spoke up. "Words are easy, Judge. What specific changes will you make?" "Fair question," the judge said. "Starting next week, my court will offer evening sessions twice a month for people who can't miss work during the day. I'm creating a new fine schedule with lower amounts and better payment options. And I'm starting a community advisory panel to give regular feedback on court practices." Marcus watched from across the room, impressed by how specific the judge's plans were. Maria Diaz looked skeptical. "And how will we know if these changes are really happening?" "I'll report back to this group in 3 months with data showing what's changed," Judge Harrington promised. "And I hope you'll hold me accountable." As the meeting ended, people came up to the judge one by one. Some shared more concerns. Others offered suggestions. A few simply thanked him for coming. The last person to approach was an elderly woman who had sat quietly during the meeting. She took the judge's hand between both of hers. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 60 years, she said softly. "You're the first judge who ever came to listen to us. That means something." Judge Harrington felt tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "I should have come sooner." 3 months passed quickly. Judge Harrington's courtroom had changed in many visible ways. There was a new sign outside listing evening court hours. Inside, a feedback box sat near the door with forms in 4 languages. The judge's bench had fewer papers on it because he now took more time with each case. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, Marcus Johnson entered the courtroom. He hadn't seen the judge in several weeks. He sat in the back row and watched. A young man stood before the judge, charged with speeding. In the past, this would have been a quick case. State the fine. Move on. But Judge Harrington asked questions. "Mr. Patel, this is your 3rd speeding ticket this year. Can you tell me what's happening?" The young man looked down. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I've been rushing to my 2nd job. I just got custody of my little sister after our parents died, and I'm trying to make ends meet." In the old days, the judge might have said that personal problems were no excuse, but today was different. Thank you for explaining. Judge Harrington said, the law still applies, but let's talk about options. Have you considered the county's financial assistance program for guardian siblings? The young man looked up, surprised. No, Your Honor. I didn't know about that. The judge nodded to a woman sitting at a desk near the front. Ms. Rodriguez is our new court resource coordinator. She can help you apply before you leave today. He looked at his computer. For the speeding ticket, I'm ordering a reduced fine and defensive driving course. The course can be taken online in the evenings. Thank you, Your Honor, the young man said, relief clear on his face. Marcus watched 3 more cases. In each one, the judge was patient, fair, and looked for solutions beyond just punishment. It was like watching a different person. After court ended, Judge Harrington spotted Marcus and waved him into his chambers. Good to see you, Mr. Johnson, the judge said, shaking his hand. What brings you here today? Just checking in, Marcus said. I heard some good things about your court and wanted to see for myself. The judge smiled. What did you think? I'm impressed, Marcus said honestly. The changes are real. They haven't been easy, Judge Harrington admitted. Some of my colleagues think I've gone soft. The court administrator complains about the longer hours, but he gestured to a stack of feedback forms. The people who actually use the court seem happier. Marcus picked up one of the forms. A feedback system. You actually did it. Every suggestion gets reviewed by our new community panel, the judge explained. They meet monthly to advise me on improvements. Marcus nodded approvingly. And the evening sessions, full every time. Turns out many people couldn't make daytime court without losing their jobs. The judge shook his head. Something I never considered before. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lissa entered with a serious face. Your Honor, the State Judicial Review Board is here. They want to see you. The judge looked surprised. I don't have an appointment with them. They say it's urgent, Lisa replied. Judge Harrington straightened his robe. Show them in. 3 people in formal business clothes entered. The leader, a stern woman with gray hair, spoke first. Judge William Harrington, I'm Catherine Ortiz, chair of the State Judicial Review Board. We've been monitoring the changes in your court over the past few months. The judge stood tall. Yes, I've made some adjustments to improve access to justice. Adjustments. Catherine raised an eyebrow. You've completely transformed your courtroom procedures. Marcus watched nervously. The Judicial Review Board had the power to discipline judges who didn't follow proper procedures. Is there a problem? Judge Harrington asked calmly. Catherine's serious expression suddenly broke into a smile. Quite the opposite. We're here because we've never seen improvements like this before. Your court has gone from having the highest number of complaints in the state to the lowest in just 3 months. The judge looked stunned. I didn't know that. The board would like you to present your methods at the annual judicial conference next month, Catherine continued. Other judges need to hear how you've made these changes. Judge Harrington turned to Marcus with a look of amazement. I don't know what to say. Marcus smiled. Say yes, Your Honor. The judge turned back to Catherine. I'd be honored, but I didn't do this alone. He gestured to Marcus. This is the man who started it all. 1 month later, Judge Harrington stood nervously backstage at the State Judicial Conference. Over 400 judges from across the state filled the large hotel ballroom. He peeked through the curtain and swallowed hard. Nervous? Asked a familiar voice behind him. The judge turned to see Marcus Johnson, dressed in a sharp blue suit. Terrified, Judge Harrington admitted, it's one thing to change my own courtroom. It's another to tell other judges they should change theirs. Marcus nodded. Just tell your story honestly. That's all you need to do. On stage, Catherine Ortiz from the Judicial Review Board was introducing the judge. Our next speaker has created a model for court reform that has caught national attention. Please welcome Judge William Harrington. The audience applauded politely as the judge walked to the podium. Some judges looked interested. Others looked bored or even annoyed. Judge Harrington took a deep breath and began. 6 months ago, I was probably a lot like many of you. I ran an efficient courtroom. I moved cases quickly. I thought I was doing a good job. He paused. I was wrong. The room became very quiet. My wake-up call came when I treated a man unfairly in my courtroom. I didn't listen to him. I didn't look at his evidence. I just wanted to move on to the next case. The judge looked toward the side of the stage where Marcus stood. That man turned out to be a federal prosecutor who specializes in civil rights cases. A murmur ran through the audience. But here's the important part, the judge continued. The real problem wasn't how I treated him. The real problem was that I treated many people that way, every single day for years. He showed slides with data from his court. Charts displayed how the number of appeals had dropped. Graphs showed increased satisfaction ratings. Statistics revealed fewer repeat offenders. These improvements didn't happen because I became soft on crime, Judge Harrington explained. They happened because people finally felt heard in my courtroom. They felt the system was fair, even when the decision didn't go their way. As he spoke, he noticed more judges sitting up straighter, taking notes. Even some of the skeptical faces showed interest now. I know what some of you are thinking, the judge said. You're thinking your court is different. You're thinking you don't have time for all this. You're thinking it won't work for you. He smiled. I thought all those things too. He clicked to his final slide, which showed a photo of his courtroom's new evening session, filled with people who would have otherwise missed their court dates. Here's what I've learned, Judge Harrington said. Justice isn't measured by how many cases we process. It's measured by how many people walk out of our courtrooms feeling they were treated fairly, whether they won or lost. After the presentation, many judges lined up to speak with him. Some asked practical questions about implementing changes. Others shared their own struggles with court efficiency. A few admitted they had seen the same problems in their own courtrooms, but hadn't known how to fix them. Marcus watched from a distance, not wanting to interfere. The judge was in his element now, speaking passionately with his colleagues. Later that evening, Judge Harrington and Marcus sat in the hotel restaurant, discussing the day. I didn't expect such a positive response, the judge said, still looking surprised. At least 10 judges asked for copies of our new procedures. You spoke from experience, Marcus said. That's powerful. The judge looked thoughtful. You know, when we first met, I was angry that you challenged me. Now I'm grateful. That's the difference between ego and wisdom, Marcus replied. Ego gets defensive. Wisdom learns and grows. A woman approached their table. She introduced herself as Judge Susan Chen from Federal District Court. Judge Harrington, your presentation was excellent, she said. I'm on the Federal Judicial Selection Committee, and we have an opening coming up. Would you be interested in applying? We need more judges with your perspective. The judge looked stunned. A federal judgeship was one of the highest honors in the legal profession. I'm honored, he stammered. I'll definitely consider it. After Judge Chen left, the judge turned to Marcus with wide eyes. Did that just happen? Marcus smiled. It did, and it's well deserved. Judge Harrington shook his head in amazement. All because I fined the wrong man for a parking ticket. No, Marcus corrected him. All because you were willing to learn from your mistake. 2 years passed. On a bright spring morning, a crowd gathered outside the federal courthouse downtown. Reporters with cameras stood ready. Important-looking people in suits chatted in small groups. A large banner hung above the entrance. Investiture ceremony. Honorable William Harrington. Inside, in a private room, Judge Harrington adjusted his new black robe. It was different from his old state court robe. Heavier, with gold stripes on the sleeves marking his position as a federal judge. How do I look? He asked Lisa Torres, who had followed him from state court to be his federal court administrator. Like a federal judge, she said with a smile. Who would have thought? There was a knock at the door. Marcus Johnson entered, now the head of the Civil Rights Division for the entire region. "Almost time, Your Honor," Marcus said. "They're ready for you." The judge nodded, then hesitated. "Marcus, I've been meaning to ask you something. Would you be the one to swear me in today? It would mean a lot to me." Marcus looked surprised. "Me? Isn't the chief judge supposed to do that?" "Normally, yes. But they're allowing me to choose someone special for the role." The judge looked directly at Marcus. "None of this would have happened without you." Marcus felt honored but unsure. What will people think? A black man who you once fined unfairly now swearing you in as a federal judge. "They'll think it's a powerful symbol of how justice should work," the judge replied. "How we can learn from our mistakes and grow better because of them." Marcus thought for a moment, then nodded. "I'd be honored." The ceremony in the grand courtroom was formal and dignified. Judge Harrington's family sat in the front row. Behind them were dozens of people from his old courthouse, including many who had served on his community advisory panel. In the back rows sat people from the Oak Street neighborhood who had attended that first community meeting 2 years ago. The moment came for the oath of office. Marcus stepped forward, holding the Bible. Judge Harrington placed his hand on it and repeated the solemn words promising to uphold justice and the Constitution. After the ceremony, people lined up to congratulate the new federal judge. One man waiting patiently in line was Robert, who had spoken at the community meeting about his son. When Robert reached the front of the line, Judge Harrington immediately recognized him. "Robert, thank you for coming," the judge said warmly. "I wanted to tell you something, Judge," Robert said. "My son is doing well now. After you changed the community service program, he got a real chance to turn things around. He's in college now." The judge smiled. "That's wonderful news. He couldn't come today because he has finals," Robert explained. "But he wanted me to give you this." He handed the judge a folded paper. Judge Harrington opened it. It was a handwritten note from Robert's son, thanking him for changing a system that had once seemed unfair and giving people like him a second chance. Later, at the reception, Judge Harrington found a quiet moment with Marcus. "I have something for you," the judge said, handing Marcus a small gift box. Marcus opened it and found a gavel with an inscription. "Justice is listening before deciding." "My first lesson from you," the judge explained, "and still the most important one." Marcus smiled. "You've taught me something too." "What's that?" the judge asked. "That people can change, truly change, when they decide that being right is less important than doing right." They stood together by the window, looking out at the city below. A city where the justice system was slowly improving, one courtroom at a time. "What's next for you?" the judge asked. "I hear there might be a judicial opening in the appellate court next year." Marcus looked surprised. "Me? A judge? Why not?" Judge Harrington said. "The bench needs more people who understand what justice really means." Marcus thought about it. "Maybe. We'll see." The judge smiled. "Whatever you decide, the parking is free in the judge's lot." They both laughed, remembering the parking ticket that had started everything. As the sun set over the city, two men from very different backgrounds stood side by side, united by a shared vision of what justice could be and should be for everyone who entered a courtroom. What had begun as a moment of injustice had blossomed into something neither man could have predicted: a friendship built on respect, a system transformed by honesty, and a community that finally felt heard.